Captain Jake Morrison stood before the main viewing screen of the colony ship UES Frontier and watched the red planet grow larger with each passing hour. The world they called Crimson Shore looked beautiful from space with its swirling clouds and deep crimson surface, but Jake knew the truth was far different. Dia Lisa Grant walked up beside him holding a datapad with readings that made his stomach turn cold. Atmospheric analysis was complete, and it was worse than their worst fears. Lisa cleared her throat and spoke in a quiet voice that carried. Across the bridge. The planet below them contained an atmosphere that was 78% methane, 15% sulfur compounds, and 7% other gases that would kill a human in seconds. The gravity was 1.3 times stronger than Earth, which meant every step would be harder and every breath would be a fight for survival. Jake called for an emergency meeting in the main conference room, where his core team gathered around. The metal table. Commander Ryan Blake sat with his arms crossed and a deep frown on his face, while Dr. Amanda Price studied her xenobiology reports with intense focus. Dr. Helen Carter reviewed medical data on her tablet, and Tech Sergeant Kyle Rogers examined equipment failure reports that painted a grim picture of their situation. The mission parameters were clear and non-negotiable. Earth needed the rare element called zerithium that existed in massive quantities beneath Crimson Shore's surface. Without this element, human technology would stop advancing and their expansion into space would end. The problem was that no human could breathe the air on this planet, and their current life support systems were not designed for long-term survival in such hostile conditions. Ryan Blake spoke first and suggested they abort the mission and search for another planet with zerithium deposits. He argued that losing the entire colony would be worse than returning empty-handed to Earth. Amanda Price disagreed strongly and pointed out that Crimson Shore contained the largest known deposits of zerithium in the galaxy, and finding another source could take decades or centuries. Helen Carter warned that even small breaches in environmental suits could cause permanent damage to human organs. The sulfur compounds in the atmosphere would burn through lung tissue, and the methane would cause rapid oxygen deprivation. She estimated that without proper protection, a human would survive less than 30 seconds on the planet's surface. Kyle Rogers had more bad news about their equipment. The preliminary atmospheric processors they had deployed from orbit had failed within 6 hours of landing. The planet's aggressive chemistry was eating through their metal alloys faster than anyone had predicted. The sulfur compounds were reacting with their standard materials in ways that their computer models had never anticipated. Jake listened to each report and felt the weight of command pressing down on his shoulders. 5,000 colonists were depending on his decisions, and Earth was counting on this mission to succeed. He looked around the table at faces that showed fear, doubt, and determination in equal measure. The first landing party consisted of 50 volunteers who would establish a temporary base while the main colony ship remained in orbit. Jake led this group down to the surface in heavily armored shuttles that could protect them during the descent through the toxic atmosphere. The landing was rough due to the increased gravity and atmospheric interference, but they managed to touch down safely in a valley that offered some protection from the worst weather. Setting up the temporary base took 12 hours of dangerous work in environmental suits that felt clumsy and restrictive in the heavy gravity. Every movement required extra effort, and every breath of recycled air reminded them how far they were from home. The portable habitat modules connected together to form a small pressurized area where they could remove their helmets and eat their first meal on Crimson Shore. Kyle Rogers discovered the first major problem when he checked the equipment after their first night on the planet. The atmospheric processors were showing signs of corrosion that should have taken weeks to develop. The sulfur compounds were more aggressive than any computer model had predicted, and their filtration systems were breaking down at an alarming rate. Jake gathered his team for another meeting inside the cramped habitat module. Lisa Grant estimated they had perhaps 3 weeks before their life support systems would fail completely. The backup systems might give them another week, but after that, they would have no choice but to evacuate back to orbit and admit defeat. The mood in the room was dark until Amanda Price spoke up with an idea that changed everything. She had been studying samples of the planet's soil and atmosphere and discovered something unexpected. Certain bacteria from Earth could actually process some of the toxic compounds in Crimson Shore's atmosphere and convert them into less harmful substances. It was a small discovery, but it gave them hope. Jake made a decision that would define the rest of their mission. Instead of retreating and looking for an easier planet to colonize, they would adapt their technology and tactics to not just survive on Crimson Shore, but to thrive. They would find a way to breathe poison and call it home. The real work was just beginning. Lisa Grant and Kyle Rogers worked through the night developing new filtration systems that could handle the aggressive chemistry of Crimson Shore's atmosphere. It combined Earth-based chemical processes with modified alien plant enzymes that Amanda Price had found in the ship's xenobiological sample storage. The result was a hybrid system that could create small pockets of breathable air within the toxic environment. The breakthrough came when Lisa discovered that by using a series of chemical reactions, they could neutralize the sulfur compounds before they reached the main filtration systems. Kyle designed new housing materials that could resist corrosion by using a combination of ceramic composites and bioengineered polymers. Together, they built the first prototype atmospheric processor that could actually survive more than a few hours on Crimson Shore's surface. Amanda Price made an even more important discovery while studying soil samples from different areas around their landing site. Certain bacteria from Earth that they had brought for terraforming experiments could not only survive in the toxic soil but actually thrived by eating the poisonous compounds. These bacteria converted methane and sulfur into less harmful substances that other Earth organisms could tolerate. Jake Morrison approved the construction of the first permanent habitat using a revolutionary underground design. Instead of trying to build structures that could withstand the planet's aggressive atmosphere, they would dig down into the bedrock and create pressurized tunnels connecting underground chambers. The rock would provide natural protection, while their new atmospheric systems maintained breathable air inside. Ryan Blake organized the colonists into specialized teams with specific roles for surviving on the hostile planet. The atmospheric engineers worked on improving air quality systems, while habitat builders focused on expanding their underground complex. Resource extraction teams developed new methods for mining xerithium, while minimizing exposure to the toxic environment. Each team created detailed protocols for working safely in conditions that would kill unprotected humans. The work was dangerous and exhausting, but the colonists adapted quickly to their new reality. They developed shift rotations that limited exposure time while maximizing productivity. Teams worked in pairs with backup systems for every critical function. Radio communication was constant, and medical teams were always ready for emergency situations. Their first major crisis came during the third week when atmospheric monitoring stations detected an approaching storm system, unlike anything in their computer models. The storm contained concentrated sulfur compounds that could dissolve their outer habitat barriers in minutes. Kyle Rogers volunteered to lead a dangerous mission to reinforce the structures while the storm raged above them. 6 volunteers joined Kyle in the most hazardous work any of them had ever attempted. They wore the new experimental suits that could theoretically protect them from the concentrated acids in the storm, but had never been tested under such extreme conditions. The work required them to seal cracks in the outer barriers, while sulfur rain fell around them like liquid fire. During the worst part of the storm, engineer Danny Walsh suffered a catastrophic suit failure when a piece of flying debris tore through his protective gear. A toxic atmosphere rushed into his suit, and he collapsed within seconds as the poisonous gases burned his respiratory system. Kyle Rogers and 2 other team members dragged Danny to the emergency airlock while he struggled to breathe. Dr. Helen Carter performed emergency medical treatment using experimental techniques she had developed specifically for atmospheric poisoning. She flushed Danny's lungs with neutralizing compounds and used new medications to counteract the chemical burns in his throat and airways. The treatment was dangerous and unproven, but it was his only chance for survival. Danny's recovery took 2 weeks, but he not only survived the exposure, but seemed to develop some resistance to the planet's toxins. His blood chemistry showed changes that allowed him to process small amounts of the toxic gases more effectively than before. Helen Carter documented these changes carefully because they suggested that humans could adapt to Crimson Shore's environment with proper medical support. The storm lasted 4 days and tested every system they had built. The underground habitats held firm, and their new atmospheric processors continued working even when the surface equipment failed. When the storm finally passed, they emerged to find their temporary structures destroyed, but their main colony intact and functional. Lisa Grant's team celebrated their first major victory when the atmospheric processors not only survived the storm, but actually improved their performance. The extreme conditions had activated certain chemical reactions that made the filtration systems more efficient. They had learned to use the planet's hostile environment to their advantage. Kyle Rogers led survey teams to establish mining operations in areas rich with xerithium deposits. They used new drilling techniques that minimized atmospheric exposure while maximizing extraction efficiency. The underground tunnels connected mining sites to processing facilities and living areas, creating a network that protected workers from the surface environment. Amanda Price established the first experimental gardens using modified earth plants and the beneficial bacteria she had discovered. These plants could survive in filtered atmospheres that still contained trace amounts of toxic gases. More importantly, they produced food that was safe for human consumption and helped process atmospheric contaminants. The colony's first successful xerithium extraction proved that their mission could succeed. A rare element existed in even greater quantities than Earth had hoped, and their new mining methods could extract it safely and efficiently. Jake Morrison sent their first progress report to Earth with news that the impossible mission was becoming possible. 3 months after landing, they had established 3 interconnected underground settlements connected by pressurized tunnels. The atmospheric systems were stable and improving with each modification. The colonists had adapted their work schedules and safety protocols to handle the daily challenges of life on a planet that wanted to kill them. They were not just surviving on Crimson Shore, but building the foundation for a permanent human presence in an environment that had seemed completely uninhabitable. 6 months after landing on Crimson Shore, the human colony had grown beyond anyone's expectations. 3 interconnected settlements housed over 200 colonists who had adapted to life in underground tunnels and filtered atmospheres. Amanda Price made a discovery that changed their understanding of human adaptability when she noticed that some long-term colonists were showing remarkable physiological changes. The changes were subtle but significant. Colonists who had been on Crimson Shore since the beginning showed increased lung capacity and altered blood chemistry that helped them process trace amounts of toxic gases more effectively. Their bodies were adapting to the planet's environment in ways that medical science had never documented before. These people could work longer in marginal atmospheric conditions and recovered faster from minor exposure incidents. Dr. Lisa Grant's atmospheric engineering team achieved their greatest success when they completed the first large-scale breathing dome. The semi-permanent structure maintained Earth's normal atmosphere across several acres of surface area using a combination of their proven filtration systems and new engineered atmospheric processors. The dome became the foundation for their first proper town, which they named Haven Valley. The breathing dome represented more than just technological achievement. It proved that humans could create truly livable spaces on Crimson Shore without hiding underground. Colonists could walk under open sky and work in natural light while breathing clean air. Children could play outside, and families could live in houses instead of cramped tunnel compartments. Their success attracted attention from unexpected sources. Survey teams exploring areas beyond their settlements discovered they were not alone on Crimson Shore. Indigenous life forms had evolved to thrive in the planet's toxic atmosphere, but these creatures were completely different from anything in Earth's biological databases. The silicon-based organisms were not carbon-based like Earth life, but used the planet's aggressive chemistry as a foundation for their metabolism. Commander Ryan Blake had to develop entirely new protocols for dealing with these alien life forms. The creatures were not hostile to humans, but they were incompatible with human technology in dangerous ways. Their metabolic processes accelerated the corrosion of metal equipment, and their presence caused atmospheric processors to malfunction in unpredictable ways. First contact was challenging because the silicon-based creatures communicated through chemical signals in the atmosphere that humans could not detect without special equipment. Amanda Price led research teams that worked to understand these beings and found that they were highly intelligent despite their alien nature. They had complex social structures and showed curiosity about the human. Colonists Jake Morrison made the controversial decision to study these creatures instead of avoiding them. Many colonists wanted to keep the aliens away from their settlements, but Amanda argued that understanding them could benefit both species. Her research teams developed communication protocols using chemical signals that the creatures could recognize and respond to. The breakthrough in alien relations came when Amanda discovered that the silicon-based life forms could actually help human colonization efforts. These creatures processed certain atmospheric toxins as part of their normal metabolism, and their presence could help purify local environments. Working with them instead of against them could make colonization easier and more sustainable. Kyle Rogers began developing hybrid technologies that incorporated principles learned from studying the alien creatures. These new tools and habitat systems were far more durable and efficient than original Earth-designed equipment. The alien-inspired modifications could resist atmospheric corrosion and actually improve performance over time rather than degrading. The colony faced its greatest challenge yet when seismic monitoring detected massive underground instability. Geological surveys revealed that their mining operations had triggered shifts in underground gas pockets that contained highly concentrated toxic compounds. A major seismic event could release these gases into the atmosphere and make large areas completely uninhabitable even with their advanced protection systems. The crisis required cooperation between humans and aliens on a scale never attempted before. Amanda Price worked with the silicon-based creatures to understand the underground gas systems, while Kyle Rogers designed emergency containment systems that could prevent catastrophic releases. Lisa Grant modified atmospheric processors to handle much higher concentrations of toxic compounds if the worst-case scenario occurred. Ryan Blake coordinated evacuation plans for settlements that might be affected by gas releases, while organizing teams to implement emergency containment measures. The work was extremely dangerous because it required humans to venture into areas where atmospheric toxicity approached lethal levels even with their best protective equipment. The seismic event struck during their fourth day of preparation work. Underground gas pockets ruptured and released clouds of concentrated toxins that would have killed every human on the planet if they had not been prepared. The emergency containment systems held, and the modified atmospheric processors managed to process the worst contamination within hours instead of days. During the crisis, the silicon-based creatures proved their value as allies by actively helping to neutralize toxic gas clouds using their natural metabolic processes. They worked alongside human teams in areas too dangerous for any protective equipment, and their assistance prevented several potential disasters that could have forced complete evacuation. The successful management of the seismic crisis marked a turning point in human colonization of Crimson Shore. They had not only survived their worst environmental challenge, but had done so by working with the planet's ecosystem instead of fighting against it. The cooperation between humans and aliens created new possibilities for sustainable development that neither species could have achieved alone. Haven Valley expanded rapidly after the crisis as colonists gained confidence in their ability to handle whatever challenges the planet could present. New settlements were planned using hybrid technologies and alien cooperation that would make them more resilient and efficient than anything built with purely human methods. The colony was transforming from a desperate survival mission into a thriving permanent settlement that could serve as a model for human expansion into hostile environments throughout the galaxy. 1 year after landing on Crimson Shore, the human colony had become something Earth had never imagined possible. 5 settlements housed over 500 people who lived and worked in an environment that should have killed them all within hours. Their mining operations exceeded all production targets, and they had developed sustainable methods for expanding habitable zones across the planet's hostile surface. Success brought complications that Jake Morrison had never anticipated. Dr. Helen Carter discovered that many long-term colonists were developing physiological dependencies on the medical treatments that helped them process atmospheric toxins. Without regular doses of neutralizing compounds and blood chemistry medications, these people could no longer safely return to Earth normal environments. The changes were irreversible and progressive. Colonists who had lived on Crimson Shore for more than 8 months showed permanent alterations in lung structure and blood composition that made them dependent on the planet's unique atmospheric chemistry. They had become something new, a branch of humanity that could thrive in toxic environments, but could no longer survive in the clean air of their birth world. Jake faced a moral crisis when Earth Command transmitted new orders demanding increased xerithium production to meet growing military needs. The required production levels would necessitate more aggressive mining techniques that would disrupt the silicon-based ecosystem the colonists had learned to work with. These methods could destabilize the atmospheric balance they had worked so hard to achieve. Dr. Lisa Grant proposed a radical solution that divided the colony leadership. Instead of fighting the planet's natural chemistry, they should fully embrace it by genetically modifying their atmospheric processors to work symbiotically with Crimson Shore's ecosystem. This approach would create a truly sustainable colony, but would make the colonists even more dependent on the planet's unique environment. The proposal sparked heated debates in colony meetings where families had to decide whether to commit their children to life on an alien world or risk everything by returning to Earth. Many colonists argued that they had already crossed the point of no return and should focus on building the best possible life on Crimson Shore. Others worried about cutting all ties to humanity's home world. Commander Ryan Blake led a survey mission to establish a 6th settlement in the planet's most hostile region, where massive xerithium deposits lay beneath concentrated toxic zones. The area was so dangerous that even their advanced life support systems would be pushed beyond safe operating limits. The potential rewards were enormous, but the risks were unprecedented. During the survey mission, Blake's team discovered something that changed everything they thought they knew about Crimson Shore. Ancient structures buried beneath layers of toxic sediment showed clear signs of advanced engineering and deliberate construction. The ruins were designed to work with the planet's hostile atmosphere rather than resist it, suggesting that previous inhabitants had mastered environmental challenges the humans were still struggling with. Dr. Amanda Price led archaeological teams to study the ruins using specially modified equipment that could function in the extreme toxic conditions surrounding the ancient structures. The discoveries revealed a civilization that had achieved perfect harmony with Crimson Shore's aggressive chemistry. Their technology used the planet's toxic compounds as energy sources and building materials. The ancient biotechnology was far more advanced than anything humans had developed. The previous inhabitants had created living structures that grew and grew, adapted to environmental changes while processing atmospheric toxins as part of their normal function. Their cities had been breathing organisms that existed symbiotically with the planet's ecosystem. Amanda's analysis revealed that the ancient civilization had not simply adapted to Crimson Shore's toxic atmosphere, but had deliberately created it. The planet had once been more Earth-like, but the previous inhabitants had transformed it over thousands of years to create the perfect environment for their advanced biotechnology. The current atmospheric composition was the result of careful engineering, not natural evolution. This discovery forced the colonists to reconsider their entire approach to survival on Crimson Shore. If the planet's toxic atmosphere was artificial, then it could potentially be modified or even reversed. However, the ancient technology that maintained the current environment was still active, and interfering with it could have catastrophic consequences. Jake Morrison received urgent communications from Earth Command ordering immediate evacuation of all colonists due to political pressure from factions who viewed the colonists' adaptations as dangerous mutations. Government scientists worried that the physiological changes occurring on Crimson Shore could spread to Earth's population and threaten human genetic purity. The evacuation order created panic among colonists who knew they could no longer survive. On Earth, nearly 60% of the long-term residents required Crimson Shore's unique atmospheric chemistry to live, and leaving the planet would effectively be a death sentence. They had become a new branch of humanity, adapted to thrive in environments that would kill their Earthbound ancestors. Dr. Helen Carter organized medical teams to document the full extent of physiological changes in the colonist population. Her research proved that the adaptations were beneficial mutations that enhanced human capabilities rather than dangerous deformations. The modified colonists showed improved immune systems, increased lung capacity, and enhanced ability to process environmental toxins. Ryan Blake began organizing peaceful resistance when Earth ships arrived in the system to enforce the evacuation order. The colonists prepared to demonstrate their new capabilities and prove their worth to both Earth Command and themselves. They would show that they had become something more than human while remaining fundamentally human in spirit and purpose. The confrontation would determine not just the fate of the Crimson Shore colony, but the future of human expansion into hostile environments throughout the galaxy. The colonists had learned to breathe poison and call it home, but now they had to convince their own species that evolution was not betrayal. They stood ready to defend their right to exist as a new form of humanity adapted to challenges their ancestors could never have imagined. The arrival of Earth's evacuation fleet forced the colonists to make choices that would define humanity's future among the stars. Captain Jake Morrison stood in the main command center of Haven Valley, watching the orbital displays show 12 military vessels positioned to enforce Earth Command's evacuation orders. The ships carried enough firepower to destroy the colony, but Jake knew the real battle would be fought with words and demonstrations rather than weapons. Kyle Rogers led engineering teams in a desperate race to develop ultra-resistant environmental suits capable of surviving in Crimson Shore's most toxic regions. They incorporated every lesson learned from studying the silicon-based life forms and the ancient ruins to create protective systems that pushed the boundaries of human technology. The new suits would allow colonists to work in conditions that would dissolve standard equipment within minutes. Dr. Amanda Price made breakthrough discoveries in the deepest ancient ruins where toxic concentrations reached levels that killed even the silicon-based creatures. Protected by Kyle's new suits, her team uncovered the central control systems that the previous civilization had used to manage the planet's atmospheric composition. The technology was still active after thousands of years and maintained perfect environmental balance across the entire world. The ancient control systems revealed the true history of Crimson Shore and changed everything the colonists thought they knew about their new home. The planet had indeed been Earth-like millions of years ago, but the previous inhabitants had deliberately transformed it over countless generations. They had created the toxic atmosphere as the foundation for a biotechnology civilization that used environmental chemistry as its primary energy source. Lisa Grant realized that the humans could do far more than simply extract resources from Crimson Shore. They could complete the terraforming process the ancient civilization had begun and create a world perfectly suited for human-alien hybrid technology. However, this transformation would make the planet completely uninhabitable for unmodified humans and would represent a permanent break from Earth-based humanity. The decision to pursue this path divided the colony leadership and forced families to choose between returning to Earth or committing to permanent life on Crimson Shore. Jake Morrison called colony-wide meetings where every adult could voice their opinion and vote on their collective future. The debates were intense and emotional as people struggled with the choice between safety and possibility. Dr. Helen Carter presented medical evidence showing that the physiological adaptations occurring in long-term colonists were not random mutations, but directed improvements guided by exposure to ancient biotechnology embedded in the planet's ecosystem. The changes enhanced human capabilities while maintaining essential human characteristics. The colonists were becoming something new, but remained fundamentally human in all important ways. Earth Command's evacuation deadline approached as the colonists prepared their response to demands for immediate departure. Commander Ryan Blake organized demonstrations designed to show Earth's military commanders that the adapted colonists possessed capabilities that made them valuable allies rather than dangerous outcasts. The demonstrations would take place in environmental conditions that would instantly kill unmodified humans. The first demonstration involved colonists working without environmental suits in atmospheric conditions containing concentrated toxic compounds. Amanda Price and her research teams moved freely through areas where Earth's sensors showed lethal concentrations of methane and sulfur while conducting complex scientific experiments. Their modified physiology allowed them to process the toxic atmosphere as easily as Earth humans breathed clean air. Kyle Rogers demonstrated the hybrid technologies that colonists had developed by working with the silicon-based life forms. Equipment that incorporated alien biotechnology showed performance levels far exceeding anything Earth science could produce. The tools were not just resistant to environmental damage, but actually improved their function when exposed to Crimson Shore's aggressive chemistry. Lisa Grant's atmospheric engineering team showed how they could manipulate the planet's environmental systems on a massive scale using the ancient control technology they had discovered. They created localized atmospheric zones with different chemical compositions and demonstrated precise control over weather patterns and atmospheric chemistry across hundreds of square kilometers. The most dramatic demonstration occurred when a natural atmospheric storm approached the colony with toxic concentrations that would overwhelm even the most advanced Earth protection systems. Instead of taking shelter, the colonists worked openly in the storm, using its chemical energy to power their equipment and enhance their biotechnology systems. They had learned to treat the planet's most dangerous weather as a resource rather than a threat. Earth's military observers were forced to acknowledge that the colonists had achieved capabilities that made them uniquely valuable for exploring and settling hostile worlds throughout the galaxy. The adapted humans could survive and thrive in environments that would require massive technological investments for normal colonization efforts. They represented humanity's future expansion into previously impossible territories. Jake Morrison received new orders from Earth Command, acknowledging the strategic value of the Crimson Shore colony and granting them autonomous status as humanity's first adapted settlement. The colonists would remain connected to Earth through trade and communication, but would govern themselves according to the unique requirements of their environment. The colony's success opened new possibilities for human expansion that Earth's leaders had never considered. Worlds previously written off as completely uninhabitable were now seen as potential targets for adapted human settlements. The Crimson Shore model could be replicated on dozens of toxic worlds throughout human space, creating a network of specialized colonies capable of thriving in the galaxy's most hostile environments. Ryan Blake welcomed the first delegation of Earth scientists who came to study the colonists' adaptations and learn techniques for surviving in extreme environments. The knowledge gained on Crimson Shore would benefit all of humanity as they expanded into a galaxy filled with worlds that challenged every assumption about what constituted a habitable environment. The transformation was complete, but the real work was just beginning as the colonists prepared to share their hard-won knowledge with the rest of humanity while building a civilization that could thrive in conditions their ancestors would have considered impossible. 5 years after the first desperate landing on Crimson Shore, the planet had become home to over 2,000 inhabitants, living in 12 thriving settlements connected by an extensive network of pressurized tunnels and atmospheric management systems. Captain Jake Morrison walked through the central district of Haven Valley, breathing air that would have killed him instantly during their first days on the planet. His body bore the physical marks of long-term adaptation, including enhanced lung capacity and modified blood chemistry that processed environmental toxins as efficiently as nutrients. The colony had evolved far beyond simple survival into something that redefined humanity's relationship with hostile environments. Gaia Lisa Grant had become the architect of humanity's first truly alien world where atmospheric engineering worked in harmony with the planet's natural chemistry rather than fighting against it. Her latest projects created breathing zones where toxic air became a source of energy and life instead of death. Children played in the toxic storms that had once threatened to destroy the entire colony, while their laughter carried on winds containing sulfur compounds that painted the sky in impossible colors. These second-generation colonists represented humanity's future as beings who could adapt to any environment the galaxy offered. They breathed poison as naturally as their grandparents had breathed Earth's atmosphere and viewed the hostile planet as a comfortable home rather than a dangerous frontier. Dr. Amanda Price had established the first successful interspecies research protocols working directly with the silicon-based life forms to develop technologies that benefited both civilizations. The boundary between human and alien knowledge had dissolved into collaborative science that produced innovations neither species could have achieved alone. Her research teams included both human scientists and silicon-based entities working together on projects that pushed the limits of biological and technological possibility. Kyle Rogers had founded an entirely new field of hostile environment engineering that was revolutionizing human expansion throughout the galaxy. His hybrid designs combined human innovation with alien biotechnology and ancient planetary systems to create tools and habitats that thrived in conditions previously considered uninhabitable. Other human colonies facing environmental challenges were adopting his techniques and achieving success on worlds that Earth Command had written off as impossible. Dr. Helen Carter oversaw the medical care of the first generation of children born on Crimson Shore who showed adaptations that surpassed even their parents' modifications. These young people could survive atmospheric exposures that would be lethal to Earth humans while maintaining perfect health and normal human intelligence and emotions. They were living proof that adaptation enhanced rather than diminished essential human characteristics. The success of Crimson Shore had changed Earth's entire approach to galactic colonization. Worlds once dismissed as death traps were now viewed as opportunities for human adaptation and growth. The colonial administration had established training programs where volunteers could undergo controlled adaptation processes to prepare for settlement on hostile worlds throughout human space. Jake Morrison received regular communications from other colonies requesting technical assistance and adaptation protocols developed on Crimson Shore. The knowledge gained through years of survival in impossible conditions was being applied to desert worlds with caustic atmospheres, frozen planets, with toxic ice formations and radiation-soaked environments near unstable stars. Humanity was learning to thrive anywhere life was theoretically possible. Commander Ryan Blake now served as the colony's military advisor and liaison with Earth's expanding network of adapted settlements. His role had evolved from organizing survival missions to coordinating defensive strategies for colonies that might face threats from hostile alien civilizations or environmental disasters. The adapted colonists possessed capabilities that made them formidable defenders of human territory in the galaxy's most dangerous regions. A new Earth delegation arrived not to evacuate the colonists, but to establish permanent research stations, where Earth scientists could study adaptation techniques and learn to survive in extreme environments. The visitors were amazed by colonists who worked comfortably in atmospheric conditions that registered as immediately lethal on their environmental sensors. The delegation included representatives from Earth's military who wanted to recruit adapted colonists for exploration missions to worlds too dangerous for normal humans. These missions would push the boundaries of human expansion into regions of space where only adapted personnel could survive. The colonists had become humanity's advance guard for conquering the galaxy's most hostile frontiers. Lisa Grant conducted tours of the atmospheric management facilities that maintained perfect environmental balance across thousands of square kilometers. The systems incorporated ancient alien technology with human engineering and living biological components that grew and evolved to meet changing planetary conditions. The result was a hybrid civilization that existed in perfect harmony with environmental conditions that would destroy any purely technological solution. Amanda Price demonstrated the collaboration between human colonists and silicon-based life forms and research projects that were developing new forms of biotechnology. The alien partners contributed knowledge of environmental chemistry that had evolved over millions of years, while humans provided innovation and adaptability that accelerated scientific progress. Together, they were creating technologies that would benefit both species for generations. The colony's children served as ambassadors to visiting Earth delegations, showing that adaptation had not changed essential human nature, but had enhanced human capabilities. These young people displayed normal human emotions, creativity, and social bonds, while possessing physical abilities that allowed them to thrive in conditions that would kill their Earth-born relatives within seconds. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of Haven Valley's central tower, watching aurora effects created by sulfur compounds dancing across the evening sky. The sight that had once seemed alien and threatening now appeared beautiful and welcoming. His final log entry summarized the transformation that had occurred over 5 years of determined adaptation. The colonists had come to a world that wanted to kill them, and had conquered it not through force or environmental modification, but by becoming worthy of it. They had learned to breathe poison and discovered that it tasted like possibility itself. In adapting to Crimson Shore, they had adapted to the future of human expansion among the stars, where any world could become home for people willing to change and grow. The colony represented more than successful settlement of a hostile world. It proved that humanity's greatest strength was not technology or weapons, but adaptability and determination. When faced with impossible conditions, humans could evolve and thrive while maintaining the essential characteristics that made them human. Crimson Shore was no longer an alien world, but humanity's newest home where poison had become the breath of life.